according to absolute advantage. So in this case, Fredonia should specialize in beer, and like Liberland should specialize in wine, because if they put all the resources into, if Fredonia puts all the resources in beer, they can make 4, while if Liberland puts all the resources in wine, they can make 4. So you want to pick the largest. So if one country can produce more of something than the other country with all the resources put in, that country should produce that. So as you can see, Fredonia produces more beer in that situation. So you want Fredonia to specialize in beer production, while Liberland would produce more wine in that situation. So you want Liberland to specialize in wine production, and then Fredonia and Liberland would trade with each other. That would be the most efficient outcome, is if Fredonia specializes in beer, Liberland specializes in wine production, and then they trade. Test your understanding. Suppose that initially the working population of each country is 20 million, with 10 million working in each industry. What is the total output of these two countries here? So if they have to share production here, where they put half of their people working in each industry, what is the total output of these two countries? Yeah, for both the wine and the beer, yeah. So you add up the for both the wine and the beer. So 5 and 7. So you got it. So yeah, as you can see here, I'll correct myself from before. If so if Fredonia specializes in beer production, they would produce a beer. So 8 beer. So it would double. So this 4 would double because they're spending all their time doing it. But if Liberland specializes in wine production, they would produce 8 wine because it doubles. So it would double because they're spending all the time on that. So that's my correction there. While I'll just paste this in the chat here. While so Abigail was correct. So Abigail is correct. If they both spend half their time on each resource here, the Fredonia and Liberland, if you added that up, you get 70 here. So they just multiplied each number here by 10. You get 70 beer here, and then 50 wine here. So that's if they spend half their time on producing beer and wine. Yeah. So that's not efficient. It's best if they specialize in one or the other and then trade. That's more efficient than this. If they specialize and then trade, if they specialize in then trade, as you can see, will produce 8 beer and 8 wine, or 80 beer and 80 wine. So that would be more than the 70 and 50 here. So I'll compare. Yeah, so if we look at this here, if we specialize, we're gonna get more. If we specialize in trade, we're gonna get more. So we get 80 instead of 70 for beer, and we get 80 instead of 50 for wine. So specialization will get more than if we try to do everything. So let's do this now. Suppose each country decides to specialize in the product in which they have an advantage. What will be the total output of the product, and what will be the gains from trade? Yeah, 8 and 8, correct. So yes, so well done, Abigail here. So yeah, 80 and 80. So as we saw from before, if we go back, if we go back, instead of just doing 70 beer and 50 wine, we do 80 of beer and 80 of wine. So we benefit, we get more of each if we specialize in trade, because we'll double our production of beer from 48 or 40 to 80, and double our production of wine from 40 to 8 or 80. As you can see here, it rises from 70 to 80 and 50 to 80. So it's a lot more beneficial to specialize in trade rather than try to do everything. So gains are 10 beer and 30 wine. Theory of comparative advantage. Ricardo's idea. It is not absolute advantage, but comparative advantage that provides mutual gains from trade. The advantage of producing at a lower opportunity cost than the others. So according to Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage, it makes sense for a country to specialize in production of those goods that it produces more efficiently, and to buy the goods that it produces less efficiently from other countries, even if it means buying goods from other countries that they could produce more efficiently themselves. So a country should specialize in production of those goods in which it is relatively more productive, even if it has absolute advantage of all the goods it produces. So absolute advantage is a special case of comparative advantage. So each country has a trade-off opportunity cost of each item it produces. So yeah, so the opportunity cost of wheat production is 1 bean in the United States. And United States opportunity cost of bean production is 1 wheat. The Philippines opportunity cost of wheat production is 3 beans. Opportunity cost of beans is 1/3 wheat in Philippines. So the US is comparatively better at making wheat. It gives up 1 bean, while Philippines gives up 3 beans to make wheat. So it's best if the United States makes wheat in this situation, because they have to give up less beans. While the Philippines is comparatively better at beans, it gives up 1/3 of wheat, while the US gives up 1. So the Philippines gives up less wheat to make beans. So the US should be making wheat, and the Philippines should be making beans. So the US should specialize in wheat production, while the Philippines specializes in beans production, and then they trade. Well, this can be better off specializing with trade. Suppose the United States produces at C, while the Philippines produces at B, no trade. So they produce 320 wheat and 220 beans in the situation without trade. Suppose the US specializes at A, while the Philippines specializes at F, and they trade. So in this case, they would produce 400 wheat and 300 beans if they specialize in trade. So that would be 80 more wheat and 80 more beans total. So as you can see here, if they specialize in trade, it's more efficient because they produce more of wheat and more of beans if they specialize in trade. So they can produce more of each if they both specialize in what they're best at. Okay, but what price can they trade at each other? We can find a range for the terms of trade for the two country example. US with a traded cost 1 unit of beans give 1 unit of wheat, 1 bean for 1 wheat, price in terms of wheat. Thus, they would never accept less than 1 unit of beans for 1 unit of wheat. If X is beans/wheat, X is greater than or equal to 1. Philippines with a traded cost 3 units of beans give 1 unit of wheat. Thus, they would never pay more than 3 units of beans for 1 unit of wheat. X is less than or equal to 3. Thus, the price of 1 unit of wheat could be between 1 and 3 units of beans, and both would be better off. Let's assume the terms of trade is 1 unit of wheat costs 2 units of beans, X equals 2. So you don't have to worry about these numbers. It's just more showing the accounting. You don't have to worry about calculating this kind of thing. So as you can see, the gain, if they specialize in trade, is 80 beans and 40 wheat. So they're gaining in beans and wheat if they specialize in trade compared to not trading. So as you can see, this is the benefit of trading. The production of wheat and beans is much higher. As you can see with this chart here, 1,100% growth from 1950 to 2020. The graphs show trade picking up steeply since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1995. As of 2020, world trade volume and value have expanded 4% and 5% respectively on average since 1995 when the WTO was first established. Canada is one of the world's great trading nations in relative terms. In 2018, for example, it exported $706 billion worth of goods and services and imported $753 billion. Each of these figures represents over 30% of Canada's GDP. The US is Canada's largest trading partner. Canada sells over twice as much to the US as it does to all the other countries combined and buys approximately all of its imports from that country. China has the largest share of world exports, followed by the United States and Germany. Canada comes in 12th. So exports are key to economic growth. China has about $2.5 trillion in exports in 2018, and that's all towards economic growth. So exports are very beneficial to economic growth, and if Canada can increase their exports, they're selling more to the rest of the world, and they're generating more cash flow. So driving our exports can really help our economy here. China has demonstrated that, US as well, and Germany. They have exported a lot of goods. If we can export more in Canada, our economic growth will grow. So the 8th largest export nations account for 47.4% of world exports. So China, US, Germany, Japan, Netherlands, South Korea, France, Hong Kong, all 8 of those countries account for almost half of the world exports. So arbitrage. Arbitrage is the practice of seeking a profit by buying in one market and selling for a higher price in another related market. So for example, buy $50 share of A at New York Stock Exchange, sell the share on the Indian Stock Exchange for 4250 INR, convert back to US 75 INR/USD. You make 56.67 on that trade. So that's what arbitrage is. Arbitrage in the foreign exchange market, international loans and goods markets achieves 4 outcomes: the law of one price, no round trip profit, interest rate parity, purchasing power parity. So you can do this with goods as well. You could potentially find discount goods at a Salvation Army, at Talese, at any discount store, and then resell them for more potentially. You could do that. So that's a potential option for arbitrage. Maybe buy books for $2 and sell them for like 10 or $20. That could be an option. So that would be arbitrage. You buy it at a cheap price and sell it for a higher price. So you could do that as in an e-commerce store and buy Google ads to advertise your store and make sales. So that could be an option that you do. You could also list these products on Facebook Marketplace, list them on Etsy, and then you get sales, and then advertising Google ads on Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and that could be an option for arbitrage. So example, the law of one price, iPhone sells for $1,000 on eBay and $1,500 on Amazon. Opportunity for arbitrage, making a quick profit by buying on eBay and selling on Amazon. People quickly exploit such opportunities. Eventually, price of iPhone is the same on different websites, locations. Law of one price. The law of one price states that if an item can be traded more than one place, the price will be the same in all locations. No round trip profit. A round trip is using the currency A to buy currency B, and then using B to buy A. Arbitrage removes profit from all transactions of this type. So you could make money quickly on this, like in a short term situation. So you could make money short term on these things, but long term, eventually a lot of people find out about this opportunity where they can buy cheap and sell at a higher price, and then eventually every price is the same over time. But short term, you can make money doing this, and then eventually prices adjust, so all the prices are the same. But you can make money in the short term doing this. Interest rate parity, the return on a currency is the interest rate on that currency plus the expected rate of appreciation over a given period. When the rates of returns on two currencies are equal, interest rate parity prevails. Interest rate parity means equal interest rates when exchange rate changes are taken into account. Market forces achieve interest rate parity very quickly. Purchasing power parity, a currency is worth the value of goods and services that they will buy. The quantity of goods and services that one unit of a particular currency will buy differs from the quantity of goods and services that one unit of another currency will buy. When two quantities of money can buy the same quantity of goods and services, the situation is called purchasing power parity, or PPP, which means equal value of money. Example, price of t-shirt in Canada is $22. Price of t-shirt in Europe is 15 euros. If you divide the 22 divided by 15, you get 1.46. The €1 equals $1.46 Canadian. So so you can compute the purchasing power. If the actual exchange rate does not equal this, then it's possible to make a profit by buying t-shirts in one country and selling them in another. Thus, demand and supply will change to make this equality hold. So you can use this to see, you could potentially buy t-shirts in one country and sell them in another if there is a profit to be made. So you can convert the price of t-shirt in Europe to Canadian dollars to compare. And then if let's say the price of t-shirt in Europe turns out to be 30 Canadian dollars, you could sell your t-shirts from Canada and Europe and make a profit. Arbitrage is buying a commodity in a market where the price is low, immediately selling in another market where the price is higher. Purchasing power parity does not generally hold because of many services such as haircuts are not traded internationally, transportation insurance costs, tariffs and other trade restrictions, particular preferences by consumers, the effect of the value of currencies of trade and financial assets. So purchasing power parity theory, knowing that the Big Mac is sold all over the world, the Economist magazine wondered if the local price is converted to US dollars might tell us how far a country's currency is from purchasing power parity. The Economist constructed the Big Mac index, the country's dollar price, the country's dollar price of Big Mac. So as you can see, the Big Mac index is an index created by the Economist based on the purchasing power respective countries here. So the cost of Big Mac in Switzerland is $6.91, while it's 571 in US. UK is 428, Brazil 391. So it's the same Big Mac, but it's different prices in different areas. So they can use this to compute with the value of the currency based on this. It's called the Big Mac Index. Does the Big Mac Index tell the truth? It is not. Big Mac looks and tastes the same in all places, but most of its values is in service. The price differences arise from different prices of services that arise from different wage rates, not from over or undervalued currencies. Speculation. Speculation is trading on the expectation of making profit. Speculation contrasts with arbitrage, which is trading on the certainty of making a profit. Most foreign exchange transactions are based on speculation. The expected future exchange rate influences both supply and demand, so it influences the current equilibrium exchange rate. The expected future exchange rate and expectation is the forecast. Exchange rate forecasts, like weather forecasts, are made over horizons that run from a few hours to many months and perhaps years. But exchange rate forecasting differs from weather forecasting in three ways. First, exchange rate forecasts are hedged within a lot of uncertainty. Second, there are many divergent forecasts. Third, the forecasts influence the outcome, self-fulfilling prophecy. Dependence of today's exchange rate and forecast of tomorrow's exchange rate can give rise to exchange rate volatility in the short run. Exchange rate volatility. Exchange rate might arise one day and fall the next as news about the influence in the exchange rate change the expected future exchange rate. The influence of expectations and the constant arrival of news about the influences of supply and demand make changes in the exchange rate impossible to predict, but trends around which the exchange rate fluctuates are predictable and depend on market fundamentals. The real exchange rate. The real exchange rate is the relative price of Canadian produced goods and services for foreign produced goods and services. It measures the quantity of real GDP of other countries that a unit of Canadian real GDP buys. The equation that links the nominal exchange rate and real exchange rate is this one: RER equals E times P divided by P star, where P is the Canadian price level and P star is the foreign price level. To understand the real exchange rate, suppose the exchange rate is 100 Swiss francs per CAD. Canada produces only computer chips priced at $150 each, so price equals $150, 15,000 francs. Yen, so my apologies. So 100 yen equals 1 Canadian, $150 price Canadian equals 15,000 yen. Japan only produces iPods priced at 5,000 yen each, so price star equals 5,000 yen. Then the real Japanese yen exchange rate equals 100 times 150 divided by 5,000 equals 3 iPods per chip. If both countries produce identical goods, then the price levels expressed in the same currency will be the same and RER will equal 1. In reality, both countries produce different bundles of goods, and the forces of demand and supply in the goods markets determine P and P star, and the real exchange rate equals can equal 1. So the nominal exchange rate changes, but P and P star do not change. Then the change in E brings an equivalent change in RER. Price levels of money. In the long run, RER is determined by the real forces of demand and supply in the markets for goods and services. So in the long run, E is determined by RER and the price levels. That is E equals RER times P star divided by P. In the long run, the quantity of money in each country determines the price level of that country. For a given real exchange rate, a change in the quantity of money brings a change in the price level and change in the exchange rate. 3 possible exchange rate policies: flexible exchange rate, fixed exchange rate, and crawling peg. Flexible exchange rate. Flexible exchange rate policy is one that permits the exchange rate to be determined by demand and supply. No direct intervention in the foreign exchange market by the central bank. So this one, we have a floating / flexible exchange rate in Canada. There is some intervention by the foreign exchange by the central bank, less than 6 times per year. It has to be. So they can only intervene less than 6 times a year. And that's what happens. And that makes it flexible. So they're not controlling the exchange rate directly, except for only a few times a year. So that's how a flexible exchange rate works. So it can go up and down without intervention from the central bank. And that's how Canada's works. So the central bank's not constantly controlling it. While a fixed exchange rate policy is one that pegs the exchange rate at a value decided by the government or central bank and is achieved by direct intervention in the foreign exchange market to block unregulated forces of demand and supply. So fixed exchange rate requires active intervention in the foreign exchange market. So countries that are smaller and trying to grow and potentially with that are not democratic, they have fixed exchange rates a lot of the time. So they control it to potentially for easier trade. So they can set the exchange rate at a certain level so they can trade easier with other countries. So for example, Nepal does this with India. So they fix their exchange rate to the Indian rupee, where their currency is pegged to the Indian rupee. So it's easier for them to trade with India because their currencies are set at the same value. So it's very easy to trade with India. And this is a good thing for countries to do if they really rely on trade. If they rely on exporting as a source of revenue to grow their economy, they may want to fix their exchange rate to another country's currency. So that can be very effective. And Nepal has grown a lot from that through exporting a lot to India, through fixing their exchange rate to the Indian rupee. So this is a great strategy for countries that want to grow and export a lot more. So it's easier to trade because the exchange rate won't change that much. So figure 9.6 shows how the Bank of Canada can intervene in the foreign exchange market. Suppose that the target is 90 US cents per Canadian dollar. If the demand for Canadian dollars increases, the bank sells Canadian dollars, increase supply. Demand for Canadian dollars decreases, the Bank of Canada buys Canadian dollars, decrease supply. Persistent intervention on one side of the foreign exchange market cannot be sustained. If an increase in demand currency not allowed to appreciate at the current fixed rate shortage of Canadian dollars in the world market, Bank of Canada must supply the shortage, increase the money supply. Decrease in demand currency not allowed to depreciate at the current fixed rate surplus of Canadian dollars in the world market. Bank of Canada must buy the surplus with foreign exchange reserves to maintain the fixed rate, decrease the money supply, to run out of foreign reserves. So this is a good chart here. It's on slide 24 of this PowerPoint. So floating currency, like we have in Canada, floating currency reduces the need for foreign currency reserves. Freedom to set policy interest rates to meet domestic objectives may help to prevent imported inflation, insulation for an economy after an external shock, especially for export-dependent countries, partial automatic correction for a current account deficit, less risk of speculative attack. Fixed currency, certainty of currency value, gives confidence for inward investment, reduced cost of currency hedging for businesses, stability helps to control inflation, it is discipline of businesses to help keep unit labor costs low and drive efficiency, can lead to lower borrowing costs, lower yields and bonds, imposing responsibility in government policies, less speculation, and fixed exchange rate is credible. So these are all traits of each. So Nepal has a fixed currency to India, while Canada has a floating currency. Exchange rate policy, crawling peg. Crawling peg is an exchange rate that follows a path determined by decision for the government or central bank as achieved by active intervention in the market. It's very similar to the fixed exchange rate. Very similar. It's really under the same umbrella. China is a country that operates a crawling peg. So they've done this to make their currency worth less in the past, and that was very effective for increasing their exports. So crawling peg works like a financial account, official settlements account. The current account records receipts from exports of goods and services sold abroad, payments for imports of goods and services from abroad, net interest income paid abroad, positive receipts greater than payments, net transfers such as foreign aid payments, positive receipts greater than payments, current accounts balance equals exports minus imports plus net interest income plus net of transfers. Exports minus imports is trade balance. So it combines the exports minus imports with our investment income, basically. Capital account records receipts, foreign investment in Canada, payments, Canadian investment abroad. Shows the movement of Canadian and foreign currencies as a result of the buying and selling of assets internationally. This type of spending represents a change in ownership of assets, either a result of portfolio investment, shares and bonds, direct investment, assets, e.g. real estate, or a whole company. So it goes through mostly the investments. So capital account is more investment focused. So this account also has a statistical discrepancy that arises from errors and omissions in measuring international capital transactions. So here, for each of the following transactions, identify where it appears in Canada's current account and whether it's classified as receipt or payment. So I'll talk about the first example. A Canadian movie chain purchases the rights to screen an Italian film in Canada. Screening a film is a service, so this transaction is part of a trade in services. Because a Canadian firm is purchasing a foreign product, the transaction is classified as payment. So a payment would be a cash outflow, while a receipt would be a cash inflow. So a receipt would be like a sale, so you're getting money from it. It would be part of sales, while a payment would be a cost. So what about an American family purchases a Canadian-made trailer for their summer vacation? Would that be a receipt or a payment for Canada? Yes, it would be receipt for Canada. So a trailer is a tangible good. So this transaction is part of merchandise trade because a foreigner is purchasing Canadian product. This is a receipt. Yeah, so it's a cash inflow to Canada. Excellent. Then what about a Canadian sends a monetary gift to relatives in India? Would that be a receipt or a payment? Yes, payment because it's cash outflow. Excellent. So monetary gift is unilateral transfer because a foreigner is receiving the transfer from a Canadian. The transaction is classified as a payment. So a Canadian shareholder receives dividends from a Japanese corporation. Share dividends part of investment income because Canadians receiving this income from foreign sources is classified as receipt. So the official settlements account is commonly categorized as part of the capital account. It records the change in Canadian official reserves, which are the government's holdings of a foreign currency. If Canadian official reserves increase, the official settlements account is negative. Why? Holding foreign money is like investing abroad. Canadian investment abroad is a minus item in the capital account. The sum of these balances on three accounts always equals zero. If we include the official reserve account as part of the capital account, we get zero. For example, to pay for our current account deficit, we must either borrow more from abroad than we lend abroad, use our official reserves to cover the shortfall. If official reserves decrease, the official settlements account is positive, hereby an equal and offsetting amount to make it equal to zero. So if the balance of payment always balances, then why do we talk about the US trade deficit? For each particular section of the balance of payments, there could be an imbalance. When credits are greater than debits, there's a surplus. When credits are less than debits, there's a deficit. Thus, there could be a deficit or surplus in any of the following: merchandise trade goods, services trade, foreign investment income, unilateral transfers, private investment, the flow of gold and money between central banks and treasuries, or any combination of these or other international transactions. The statement that a country has deficit or surplus in its balance of payments must refer to some particular class of transactions. So here, this is Canadian balance of payment accounts 2019. Canadian imports exceeded Canadian exports, and the current account had a deficit of 47 billion. How do we pay for imports to exceed the value of exports? We borrow. So if imports are greater than exports, as we see here, we borrow. Or we dip into our savings to pay off that deficit because we have more cash outflows than inflows. So we have to borrow to make the difference or dip into our savings to, yeah. We pay for a current account deficit by borrowing from the rest of the world. Our foreign borrowing was 42 billion. The statistical discrepancy between the capital account and the current account transaction was 3 billion. Thus, the capital account balance is 45 billion. So, Canadian official reserves decreased in 2019 by 2 billion. Holding less foreign reserves is like borrowing from the rest of the world. So we need to borrow to pay off the deficit of. We had more imports than exports, so we had to borrow to make that up. So an individual balance of payment accounts. So this can be applied to personal finance as well. So for example, consider Jackie in 2019 earned an income of $25,000 exports. So in this case, for personal finances, for your personal budget, your income will be your exports. So earned an income of $25,000 in exports. Investments earned her interest income of $1,000 net interest income. Jackie's CA shows an income of $26,000 receipts. So just add the exports and net interest income together, you get $26,000. And then she spent $18,000 buying consumption goods and services. She also bought a new house, which cost her $60,000. So those are expenses. Her total expenditure imports was $78,000 payments. So imports are the same as payments. So that's what we have to pay for with her income. Jackie's expenditure minus her income is $52,000, 78,000 minus 26,000. So she has $52,000 in borrowing. So her current account deficit is $52,000. So based on this, she'd have to borrow to pay for that. She'd have to borrow from some person or bank to pay the $52,000 or take that out of her savings. That's the only way she can pay for this deficit. So if her payments are higher than her income, then she has to borrow or take it out of her savings. To pay for expenditures of $52,000 in excess of income, must either use money that she has in the bank, currency reserves, or take out a loan borrow. Suppose she borrowed $50,000 to help her buy the house, and that this loan was the only borrowing she did. So, yeah. And then she's $2,000 short, so she got that $2,000 from her own bank account. So that might be savings in this case. She got $2,000 from savings and $50,000 from debt. So paid the so the deficit she paid for with mostly debt, with mostly borrowing, but with some savings. So Jackie's income from her work is like a country's income from its exports. Her income from her investments is like a country's interest income from foreigners. Her purchase of goods and services, including her purchase of a home, are like country's imports. Jackie's loan borrowing from someone else is like a country's borrowing from the rest of the world. Change in Jackie's bank account is like change in the country's official reserves. And you can create a budget with these types of concepts here. So you could create the amount of income you get, the amount of interest income you get, the amount of payments you have to pay, the amount of debt you're taking out to pay any deficit, and your savings. So you could structure your personal budget like this with these slides here, and that would be very effective to determining if you are if you have more income than expenses, if you have more expenses than income, where you can pay, like if you need more money to pay, like if you need money to pay your expenses, if you need to borrow, you need to take it out of your savings, and where to cut. So you could take this chart here. Your exports would be your income, your imports would be your payments, expenses. Foreign factor income from abroad would be your investment income. And you could put this together as your budget and just, you don't have to include everything here. You could just fill in exports as income, imports as expenses, and then put every type of expense you have, every type of income you have. And then foreign factor income from abroad would be investment income. And then you put your investment dividends, interest, capital gains there. Yeah. So as you can see, the balance in the current account equals negative 63. So there's 63 billion more in foreign reserves left Canada than entered Canada. So you have to borrow to make up the difference or get that from your savings. Foreigners purchase a lot more